sequel to Chapter 26. Book 3 has a total of chapters 26 to 38. Total 16,362 words. Voiced by Ava from Clipchamp. Written by author Difam. Wish you enjoy this audiobook. The shopkeeper happily introduced the different types of spears, each with different attributes. Each attribute offered additional powers, and the price varied accordingly. After considering her options, Yi Jun decided to buy a plant attribute spear, as it was the cheapest. She took out 2 medium-grade spirit stones and 500 low-grade spirit stones to make the payment. Afterward, she stored the spear in her spatial pouch and left the shop. Even after making this purchase, Yi Jun still had several hundred low-grade spirit stones left in her pouch, which would be enough to ensure a comfortable life for her. The two of them went for a walk for a while before returning home, just in time to see a representative from the formation shop waiting at the door. Yi Jun approached and greeted him, saying, "Sorry to keep you waiting, fellow Taoist." The formation master replied, "It's no problem, I just arrived." He then entered Yi Jun's home, went to the area where the defensive array plate was placed, dismantled it, and stored it in his spatial pouch. Yi Jun escorted him to the door and slipped 2 fragmented spirit stones into his hand before returning inside and shutting the door. Holding the 2 fragmented spirit stones, the formation master could only click his tongue at Yi Jun's stinginess before taking his leave. The 4th quarter of the year marked the winter season, which meant Yi Jun couldn't grow any plants. This was the only leisurely time of the year for all spirit herb cultivators. With no planting work to do, most itinerant spirit herb cultivators spent this time cultivating, refining pills, or learning new skills, though it was rare, some rogue cultivator to pick up some simple crafting techniques. Thanks to the system's rewards for her sales, Yi Jun wasn't overly concerned about her cultivation level. As long as she continued growing more spirit grain, her level-up potential wouldn't be limited. She spent her time playing with Jun-So, occasionally telling him stories about her life in South Korea. Jun-So listened with excitement, eager to know more about the towering skyscrapers that reached millions of meters high. However, he only knew bits and pieces of her previous life in Korea, as Yi Jun had never told him about being reincarnated for the 3rd time. In the cultivation world, though there were tall structures, they couldn't compare to the skyscrapers Yi Jun spoke of. The tallest buildings in this world, as Yi Jun estimated, were likely only 4 to 6 stories high. Neither she nor Jun-So had ever entered those buildings, so their guesses remained unverified. The buildings they had seen in the marketplace were at most 2 stories high, but spacious. After a casual chat, Yi Jun went to the kitchen to cook some porridge with finely chopped meat. She stoked the fire just enough to let the porridge simmer, ensuring the fire would extinguish on its own once the wood burned out. Inside the room, on a bamboo bed, Jun-So resumed absorbing spiritual energy after their conversation ended. Whenever he felt hungry, he would go to the kitchen and serve himself some porridge. As Jun-So grew older, Yi Jun encouraged him to make more decisions for himself. Living in the cultivation world, the habits from her previous life no longer seemed fitting. When the food was ready, Yi Jun called out into the room, "The porridge is done, son. Eat whenever you're hungry. I'm off to practice with the spear." Yi Jun walked to an open courtyard, chanted a spell, and retrieved a black spear from her storage pouch. The spear weighed about 20 kilograms, significantly heavier than the wooden staff she usually trained with. She swung it back and forth a few times to get used to its weight. Within minutes, she had adapted to it and even felt it becoming too light. She couldn't help but marvel at her own strength, reminiscing about her days as a mortal in South Korea. Back then, training with a 20-kilogram weight for an extended period would have been too much even for an average man. But in this world, 20 kilograms was hardly considered heavy. She began practicing various spear techniques, fully immersed in her training. She also infused her spiritual energy into the spear, maintaining it for hours until her energy was nearly depleted. When only a trace of her energy remained, her body felt exhausted, and she finally stopped. Jun placed the spear against the wooden wall and went back inside. She sat on her bed, closed her eyes, and began meditating. Using the spirit herb cultivator's cultivation technique, she slowly absorbed the spiritual energy from heaven and earth, which steadily filled her dantian. Hours later, she felt her strength returning, and by then, night had fallen. She went to the kitchen, lit the fire, and reheated the porridge with minced meat. A few minutes later, the porridge was boiling. She served herself a bowl and ate slowly. After finishing her meal, Jun went outside to brush her teeth, then returned to the bedroom. She noticed her child was still practicing qi absorption. Without disturbing him, she resumed her own cultivation, continuing her journey of absorbing spiritual energy. She cultivated until dawn, by which time her dantian was completely full. At that moment, she broke through to the 6th level of the qi refinement stage. Despite the advancement, her expression remained calm, and she continued absorbing spiritual energy at a steady pace. When the morning light fully brightened the sky, Jun finally stopped. She went to the kitchen, gathered some firewood, lit a fire, and put spirit grain into the pot. She also took out a piece of meat, gave it a quick rinse, and waited for the porridge to boil before adding the minced meat to cook it together. Even though Jun now had a decent income, her habit of eating porridge daily hadn't changed. Porridge was a staple meal among impoverished rogue cultivators at the lowest rungs of the cultivation world. With her improved income, she still cooked porridge, but the difference now was that she could afford to add various types of meat purchased from the rogue cultivators market. The meat sold at the formation market was far more expensive, up to 40% higher than what rogue cultivators charged. Chapter 27. Her life continued in such a way, peaceful, happy, and beautiful. Time passed quickly, and spring was approaching again. With spring's arrival, Jun turned 19, and her child was now over 4 years old. To celebrate this joyful time, Jun decided to bake a birthday cake and asked Jun-so, "Father has decided to have a birthday celebration this year. Do you want to go out with me to buy the ingredients?" Jun-so agreed, so the two went out together. Springtime brought blossoming flowers, and trees were sprouting fresh buds, adding vibrant colors everywhere. They headed to a supply store where Jun inquired about buying 1 kilogram of flour for baking. This was her first time baking in this world, and she didn't know the prices. It was a brand new experience for her. The vendor quoted the price. Flour made from bao trees costs 27 lower-grade spirit stones per kilogram. Open parenthesis, the bao tree is similar to the African baobab tree, close parenthesis. Hearing the price, Jun shuddered slightly. She asked, "Why is the flour so expensive?" The vendor replied, "Bao tree flour takes a long time to cultivate and contains abundant spiritual energy. So, will you be purchasing it? Let me pack it for you." The vendor gave Jun no chance to refuse. Despite her initial hesitation, she happily paid the spirit stones and also bought other items like sugar. 1 kilogram of sugar, though of poor quality with a dark brown color, was still priced at 30 lower-grade spirit stones and 10 fragments. After finishing their purchases, they went to the wandering cultivators market. They wandered around several times, but couldn't find anyone selling eggs. Instead, Jun bought several kilograms of spiritual poultry meat, 10 birds in total, each weighing 2 to 3 kilograms. When they returned home, Jun unpacked the 1 kilogram bag of flour and began teaching little Jun-so the steps to bake a cake. Without eggs, Jun could only make a simple type of cake. She dissolved sugar in water and mixed it thoroughly, then added the mixture to the flour, stirring until it reached a thick, smooth consistency. Covering the bowl with a large cloth, she let the dough rest for an hour. Once the resting step was completed, Jun explained, "This step is done. We need to let the dough rest for an hour and then we'll bake it." She estimated the time in her mind before placing the bowl into a large pot. Inside the pot, she poured water and sealed the lid with fire burning below. Yi Jun chose to steam the cake, similar to making steamed buns, as she had never tried baking with charcoal and feared failure. After 30 minutes, the cake was cooked, releasing a faint fragrance. Opening the lid, Yi Jun carefully removed the cake. It had expanded beautifully, its color a rich golden hue from the dark sugar. Little Jun-so was excited, eagerly watching the steaming cake as Yi Jun placed it on a bamboo plate. Having never tasted cake before, the child was brimming with anticipation, wanting to sink his teeth into the plump, golden treat. The two sat at the table, gazing at the cake. Yi Jun said, "Sing along with me." They sang Happy Birthday in Korean. Hearing Yi Jun sing, little Jun-so mimicked the words. It was the first birthday song he had ever heard. Though they called it a birthday celebration, it was really a spring festival for the two of them. Their actual birthdays hadn't arrived yet, but Yi Jun tried to create this festive atmosphere for the novelty and the joy of eating cake. After finishing the song, Yi Jun cut a large slice and placed it on a plate for Jun-so. He eagerly scooped up bites with a spoon, declaring it the most delicious thing he'd ever eaten, laughing happily as he chewed. Yi Jun savored the cake slowly. The celebration ended with the two brushing their teeth and returning to their daily routines. Yi Jun had only begun teaching her child the cultivation methods of a spiritual nourisher plant and had not yet taught him the techniques for controlling earth and water. She planned to wait until he advanced to a higher level. She went to her spiritual field, using earth-controlling techniques to plow the soil and mix it with fertilizer, ash made from burned straw combined with some purchased fertilizers. After spreading the fertilizer, she scattered spiritual grain seeds, along with spirit vines and white Sephora japonica trees. She reserved a small section of the field for new seeds she had recently bought. Using water-controlling techniques, she evenly watered the 2 plots of spiritual fields. By the time she finished, it was already evening. At 4 years old, Jun-so had already learned how to cook basic spiritual grain porridge. Just add water, put in the grain, and wait. By estimating the time and adding enough firewood, he could produce a fragrant pot of porridge. As her child grew, Yi Jun no longer needed to spend as much time caring for him. Instead, she focused on tending to her crops. Her child had become self-sufficient, and she taught him all the basic cooking methods. After all, she only knew how to prepare simple dishes like these. In her previous life on Earth, she often ate out and didn't know how to cook. Her second life as a demon cultivator left her with memories too vague to recall. It wasn't until her third life, where she was reborn as a girl from a lowly, impoverished class, that she began to experience the harshness of life. Due to their tight finances, her family's meals consisted solely of spirit grain porridge and pickled vegetables for years, with the rare occasion of having a bit of meat. During that difficult period, she didn't learn much. Without sufficient knowledge of cooking, she could only teach her child the most basic dishes she knew, simple and easy to prepare. Her child, however, was a quick learner. Thankfully, children in the cultivation world were vastly different from those of the mortal realm. Their minds were sharp and intelligent, grasping new concepts with ease even with just the most basic instruction. Chapter 28. Yi Jun stepped into the kitchen and opened the pot's lid. Inside, there was a bit of leftover porridge. She scooped it into a bowl and sat down to eat. Having reached level 6, her spiritual energy had significantly increased. She contemplated that by next year, it might be time to rent a larger estate with at least 3 plots of spiritual farmland, which would be more suitable. Currently, she had an abundance of spiritual energy. Leaving it unused would be a waste, so she decided to invest it into nurturing more crops. This would yield more income and greater rewards from the system. With that resolution, she decided to rent a new estate next year. After breakfast, Yi Jun spoke to Jun-so. "I've reached level 6 now, and my spiritual energy has grown significantly. Next year, we'll move to a larger estate. With more fields, our income will increase, and life will improve. We'll even eat better." Hearing this, Jun so grew excited at the thought of eating more delicious meals. If they could plant more and sell more, the two of them would have plenty of good food to enjoy. The child eagerly looked forward to that day. Only 11 more months, and they would move to a new place. After a month of farming, Yi-jun's crops grew lush and healthy. As usual, she went to the spiritual field to infuse spiritual energy into the plants. By the time she finished her work, it was already midday, and she prepared to head back to the house to cook. Even though Jun So could cook for the two of them, Yi-jun couldn't leave all the cooking to the child. The boy needed more time for cultivation. As she was about to enter the house, Yi-jun noticed one of the spiritual herbs in the garden showing signs of pest damage. She knelt to inspect it carefully and discovered that her crops had been attacked by pests. Though still thriving, the plants showed signs of decay. Her expression darkened. She had forgotten to hire a pest prevention formation for the year. Upon further inspection, she found that 10 other spirit grain plants had also been attacked, with small pest nests hidden under their leaves. Composing herself, Yi-jun went to the kitchen to cook porridge and called out to the room where little Jun So was meditating. "The porridge will be ready soon. You can eat first if you're hungry. I need to head out for a bit." Little Jun So, deep in meditation, heard her but stayed focused and didn't respond. Yi-jun opened the door and left, heading to the formation rental area to hire a pest prevention formation. This time, she rented one for 8 months. She also asked the formation master about pest extermination services and was quoted 40 low-grade spirit stones per field. With 2 fields, the cost would amount to 80 low-grade spirit stones. The steep price made Yi-jun hesitate, and she ultimately decided to forego the service, opting only to set up the prevention formation. Hurrying back home, she went straight to the pest-damaged area, pulling out all the infected plants and tossing them into a pile. Carefully inspecting each one, she noted that spirit grain was the most affected crop. She gathered all the infected plants and burned them to ash. This time, she lost dozens of spirit grain stalks and a few spiritual vines. Grinding her teeth in frustration, she cursed the pests. A knock on the door broke her train of thought. Yi-jun opened it to let the formation master in, leading him to the fields where the defensive formation was to be set up. Once the work was complete, she escorted the formation master to the door and discreetly slipped him 2 fragments of spiritual energy as a tip. The formation master left with a nod of thanks. Yi-jun stared at her 2 spiritual fields for a moment before returning to the kitchen. She finished the last of the spirit grain porridge and then went back to her cultivation practice. The next morning, she cooked breakfast and called Jun So to eat. Afterward, she headed out to the fields for a meticulous inspection. This time, she didn't find any additional pest attacks. Satisfied, she cast a nurturing spell to infuse spiritual energy into the crops. By the time she finished her daily tasks, it was nearly noon, and she returned to the kitchen to prepare lunch. Yi-jun also called Jun So out for lunch. As they ate, Yi-jun shared, "This first quarter, we probably won't earn much because of the pest damage to the crops." Jun So listened quietly without saying anything. Yi-jun continued, "In the mortal world, there's something called pesticide and all farmers use it. But here in the cultivation world, the pests are spiritual pests. They're highly resilient and aren't affected by pesticides. That's why pesticides are useless here." She added, "Hiring someone to get rid of pests is incredibly expensive. I heard it costs 40 low-grade spirit stones to clear pests from just one field. Meanwhile, the crops from one field don't even sell for 40 spirit stones. If we hired someone, it would be like all our hard work for the quarter was wasted, just throwing everything away." Curious, Jun So asked, "Dad, what is the sea?" Yi-jun replied, "The sea is a vast place, blue like the sky, and it's filled with fish. One day, I'll buy some fish for you to try. We currently live inland, but if we travel a bit farther, we'll reach the sea. There are fishing villages there. The fish caught are transported back into here. I imagine fish are quite expensive since they have to be brought all the way here. The next morning, as usual, Yi-jun woke up early to cook breakfast. After eating with Jun-so, she headed out to the spiritual fields. On the second day, she found a few more plants had been damaged by pests. She uprooted them and burned them, suffering another small loss of spiritual herbs. With fewer plants to tend, her work finished earlier than usual. Yi-jun decided to go out and look for fish to make a new dish for Jun-so. She wandered around the loose cultivator market, purchasing some lizard meat at the price of 1 low-grade spirit stone per kilogram. She bought 10 kilograms in total. She also bought 5 kilograms each of frog meat, snake meat, and rabbit meat. As she walked, she kept an eye out for anyone selling fish, but couldn't find any. Curious, she asked a fellow cultivator selling goods if they knew where fish could be bought. The cultivator replied, "If you want to buy fish, you'll have to go to the main area. No one sells that around here." Chapter 29. Yi-jun looked in the direction the cultivator had pointed and saw that the area was quite far away. Walking there would take a long time. She asked if there was any transportation service available nearby. The cultivator replied, "In our area, no one offers transportation services. It's not a profitable job, so no one bothers doing it. But in the main city area, you'll find such services." Hearing this, Yi-jun decided to give up on buying fish. Instead, she headed to a general goods market to inquire about techniques for flying through the sky. The shopkeeper greeted her warmly and introduced a level 1 flying technique manual priced at 2 mid-grade spirit stones. Yi-jun smiled faintly and walked away. She only had a few dozen low-grade spirit stones left, far from enough to afford such a manual. Reluctantly, she decided to wait for a better opportunity in the future. The next day, Yi-jun thoroughly inspected all her spiritual crops again. On the third day, she found no signs of pest damage and breathed a sigh of relief. On the fourth day, after another inspection, she still found no issues. This time, she felt completely reassured. However, nearly half of her spiritual field had already been destroyed by pests. The loss weighed heavily on her, but there was nothing she could do. Time passed slowly, and her days settled into a monotonous routine. Eventually, as the first quarter of the year drew to a close, the remaining crop reached full maturity, ready to be harvested. Yi-jun quickly collected her yield, 12 kilograms of spiritual grain, 40 stalks of spiritual vine, and white Sephora japonica. She set aside 4 stalks to sell at the herbal market and decided to sell the remaining 36 stalks through the system. Yi-jun called out, "System, system." The system appeared. She placed the sack of spiritual grain onto the tray and pressed the sell button. The grain disappeared, and the rewards materialized, a pile of spirit stones and a small, square object. Yi-jun swiftly gathered the spirit stones and counted them. 10 low-grade spirit stones and 300 fragmented spirit stones. Curious, she picked up the square object for closer inspection. It resembled a card, with a radiant golden 5-pointed star at its center. The 4 corners were black, dotted with tiny lights resembling stars in a dark universe. Turning it over, she found a description: time travel experience card duration, 24 hours. Puzzled, Yi-jun wondered, does this mean I can travel to a different time, either in the past or future? She tried asking the system for clarification, but it gave no response. Sighing, she tucked the card away and proceeded to sell the remaining 36 stalks of spiritual herbs. The system processed the transaction quickly, and another set of rewards appeared. Yi-jun eagerly gathered them into her storage pouch. 1 bottle of primary healing pills. 1 level 2 defensive talisman. 1 wind explosion orb. 1 bottle of cinnabar. 1 level 1 wind control jade slip. As she collected the items, something caught her eye, a tiny speck of light, so small it was almost invisible. She reached out and touched it, and it absorbed into her body with a faint sound. Her cultivation level increased ever so slightly. Looking at her meager gains from the harvest, Yi Jun couldn't help but feel disheartened. The cultivation energy halo she earned was pitifully small, so minuscule it was almost laughable. Yi Jun carefully collected all the leftover remnants from her harvest, spreading them out to dry. Once dried, she planned to burn them, turning waste into fertilizer for the next planting season. In her spiritual field, there were still 2 herbs that were growing steadily. She retrieved the jade slip containing the cultivation technique she had just received from the system and placed it against her forehead to absorb its knowledge. As the jade slip transferred the technique, it shattered into tiny fragments. The manual within described the method for controlling the wind, how to generate defensive wind shields. Yi Jun attempted the technique, summoning a faint breeze. The wind was so weak that she felt it was more decorative than functional. Each attempt consumed 10 spiritual power points, but due to its low rank, learning it came easily to her. Yi Jun reasoned that the technique was weak because she had just begun practicing. Over time, it should grow stronger. With this simple thought, she continued practicing the new technique during her spare moments after the harvest. She also encouraged her child, Junso, to try learning the wind technique. Writing the method down for Junso, Yi Jun taught the child step by step. Without the aid of a jade slip, it took several days for Junso to enter the foundational stage, producing a faint breeze. Both father and child were thrilled as they practiced the new technique together. Within a few days, Junso became adept at summoning a light wind within seconds. Time flew by, and soon it was time to prepare for the next planting season. Yi Jun and Junso went to the general store to buy basic supplies, followed by a trip to the herb market to purchase specialized seeds and other essentials. She also sold some of the herbs she had grown. This time, she decided to plant only ling vines and white Sephora japonica. Returning home, Yi Jun headed straight to her spiritual field. She planted the seeds, watered them, and completed all the necessary tasks. Only then did she head into the kitchen to cook with Junso. Since Junso had become proficient in cooking, the process was much faster. Junso washed the meat and cut it into bite-sized pieces, while Yi Jun lit the stove, boiled water, and added grain to the pot, followed by the meat. After 30 minutes, the spiritual grain porridge was ready. The two sat down to enjoy the meal in a cheerful atmosphere. As night fell, they meditated together to cultivate their spiritual power. The second quarter's harvest season came and went quickly. This time, Yi Jun kept 4 stalks of spiritual herbs to sell at the herb market and sold the rest to the system. Efficiently completing her tasks, she pressed the sell button. The system rewarded her with an abundance of items. Yi Jun carefully collected everything, storing the fragmented spiritual stones and spiritual stones in her pouch. Among the rewards, she discovered 2 shards of mid-grade spiritual stones, 4 second-tier fire talismans, 1 first-tier lightning talisman, 1 life experience trial card, 1 spiritual flute, 1 pink ore, 1 massive cultivation halo light orb. Yi Jun absorbed the cultivation light orb, gaining an incredible 11 years and 2 months of cultivation progress. As Yi Jun reflected on her progress over the years, she noticed a pattern in the system's rewards. It was random and unpredictable. However, she observed that spiritual grain often resulted in smaller cultivation light orb rewards, while white Sephora japonica and ling vines yielded fewer halo light orbs but were far more rewarding when they did appear, often containing substantial cultivation progress. From this realization, Yi Jun decided to prioritize planting white Sephora japonica and ling vines over spiritual grain for future harvests. Chapter 30. In this round of selling to the system, Yi Jun received 2 mid-grade spiritual stones as her reward. With the money she had accumulated, she now had enough to purchase the fly-walk-in-air technique. She realized that this technique would be far more useful than others. As a cultivator who could not fly, Walking long distances was a constant inconvenience. Her area lacked public transportation, making travel even more difficult. Had she been poor with low income, Ye Jun would never have considered purchasing such a technique or amount. She would have accepted the long, tiring walks. But now that she had the system's golden hand, Ye Jun knew that with time, and with her steady farming, she could eventually afford the things she desired. She could provide a better life for her son, Jun So. With this in mind, Ye Jun decided to go purchase the technique the next morning. That evening, despite her best efforts, Ye Jun found it hard to focus during her meditation. Deep down, she was so excited about learning the fly walk in air technique that her mind was racing. Cultivating without the ability to fly was incomplete for a cultivator, and this anticipation made it difficult for her to focus. Despite her excitement, she did her best to calm the waves in her heart, waiting for the morning to come. Each day seemed to pass quickly, but that evening felt like time was dragging on. At dawn, Ye Jun quickly finished her usual cooking chores and waited for the sky to brighten before heading out. Jun So had also finished his breakfast and resumed his studies and cultivation practice under his Ye Jun's guidance. Ye Jun hurried to the general store, but as it was early morning, the cultivators in the area were moving slowly, taking their time to open their shops. Ye Jun patiently waited for the shopkeepers to finish their morning tasks. Once everything was ready, the store opened, and Ye Jun entered. She greeted the shopkeeper, who greeted her in turn. "Greetings, fellow Taoist. What can I assist you with?" Ye Jun replied, "I would like to buy the fly walk in air technique." The shopkeeper quickly retrieved the jade slip containing the technique from the shelf and handed it to Ye Jun in exchange for the payment. After the transaction, the shopkeeper asked, "Is there anything else you need?" Ye Jun smiled. "That's enough for now. Buying this technique has drained my funds. I'll need to sell some spiritual herbs later to make it through the next harvest. Life is tough, fellow Taoist." She spoke with a pained expression, but she lied without flinching. The shopkeeper understood the difficulties of being a spiritual herb cultivator and nodded sympathetically. "For someone like you to save enough to purchase the fly walk in air technique, it truly isn't easy." After a brief conversation, Ye Jun said her farewells and left the store. She then made her way to the herb market, took out some herbs from her storage pouch, sold them, and quickly returned home. Ye Jun called out from inside the house with excitement, "I've bought a new technique. Isn't it amazing?" She laughed joyfully in the yard. Standing in the middle of the yard, Ye Jun transferred her spiritual energy into the jade slip and began to absorb the fly walk in air technique. The process of understanding the technique was easy for her, but it took some time to familiarize herself with and apply the technique in practice. Learning this new technique felt like solving a mathematical equation. Though she had memorized it, putting it into practice was different. It took time for a practitioner to adjust and become skilled enough to make it second nature. Ye Jun was no exception. Between her daily tasks, she spent her free time practicing the fly walk in air technique. She dedicated herself to it for 3 or 4 days before she finally managed to step into the beginner's realm. In her storage pouch, Ye Jun still had a spiritual sword and a flute. Once she had mastered fly walk in air technique, Ye Jun happily flew around above her house, soaring freely. The neighbors nearby looked up and saw Ye Jun floating in the air. They too wished they could be like Ye Jun and afford to buy such a technique. Although they were Ye Jun's neighbors, they had never interacted or spoken with her. They had only seen her leave her house a few times. It seemed that Ye Jun, like them, preferred to avoid socializing, even though they were all spiritual herb cultivators. The neighbors had nothing to say about her, nor could they gossip with her. Ye Jun also recognized a fundamental principle. When channeling spiritual energy and the fly walk in air technique into a flying artifact, the energy consumption was much lower compared to flying unaided. She understood why many low-level cultivators preferred to use flying artifacts. Fortunately, she still had a spiritual sword. By flying on the sword, she consumed only 5 points of spiritual energy per second, whereas flying unaided drained 11 points per second. With a spiritual energy reserve of only 300 points as a 6th-layer Qi refinement cultivator, Yi Jun couldn't sustain this fly technique for long. Since she was a novice and her fly-walk in air technique was still at a low level, her flying speed was slow, barely faster than walking. Once she became comfortable flying with the sword, she brought out her spiritual spear to practice flying with it as well. Over 2 more days of diligent practice, Yi Jun finally concluded her training. Although she could now fly, traveling at higher speeds required her to envelop her entire body with spiritual energy to shield herself from the wind. Simultaneously channeling energy into her weapon and protecting her body resulted in significant energy consumption. For a low-level cultivator like Yi Jun, flying was no simple work. After the initial excitement of mastering flight, Yi Jun decided to document the flywalk in air technique and passed it on to Junso, hoping he would also learn it in the future. She also handed him her spare spiritual sword for practice during his free time. Yi Jun's remaining wealth amounted to less than a single mid-grade spiritual stone. However, even this modest amount was enough to sustain her and her son for a long time. With her improved spiritual energy reserves at the 6th level, Yi Jun planned to move to a new location after the 3rd quarter's harvest and the passing of winter. She intended to rent a larger spiritual field, which would allow her to cultivate more crops and, in turn, earn greater rewards and income. Despite her optimism, Yi Jun couldn't help but worry about whether the market officials' sect would investigate her abilities. She feared they might uncover her secrets, specifically the system that allowed her, a low spiritual root cultivator, to rapidly advance her cultivation. If malevolent individuals took notice of her, Yi Jun's peaceful life could be at risk. Without the system's benefits, she had no method to help other low-level cultivators progress rapidly. The system's advantages were exclusive and non-transferable. Explaining this to others would be nearly impossible, and if she were unlucky, she might even end up as a slave cultivator. The thought of becoming a true slave cultivator, forced into servitude beyond merely tending crops like most spiritual herb farmers, was terrifying. Yi Jun's imagination ran wild, but she reminded herself that this was only a passing worry. In her past life, hard work in farming could lead to a comfortable living. However, in this cultivation world, most spiritual herb cultivators lived in poverty. Yi Jun had experienced this hardship for 15 years and understood it all too well. As these thoughts weighed on her, she suddenly recalled her parents from this life. A sigh escaped her lips. Nearly 5 years had passed with no news of them. It was almost certain that something terrible had happened to them. Yi Jun herself had narrowly escaped death in that treacherous secret realm. She shuddered as the memories of helplessness resurfaced. The fear and despair she had felt left her trembling, and she vowed never to enter another secret realm again. Chapter 31. Yi Jun glanced into the room and saw Junso still diligently cultivating. It seemed that using so many things at once was a bit much for someone his age. Yi Jun walked in and gently said, "Take your time learning, no need to rush. We have a lifespan of up to 200 years. You can take it slow to learn." Junso replied, "I understand." The days of tending to the crops of the 3rd quarter passed quietly and peacefully. Most rogue cultivators, like Yi Jun's family, lived the same way. Although the lives of rogue cultivators were challenging, none of them gave up. Having been born into this life, whether they liked it or not, they had to move forward. There was no turning back. It was much like the modern world of Yi Jun's previous life. Even those born into hardship, struggling under the weight of life's burdens, still had to persevere. Nobody dared to end their life or give up entirely. They gritted their teeth and pushed onward. Meanwhile, in the outer sect area of Qingyun sect, a group of demonic cultivators had quietly replaced the positions of outer disciples, slowly infiltrating and taking control. In Western continent, after acquiring many new pills, numerous demonic cultivators advanced rapidly, breaking through to new realms. Their cultivation speed, already swift, now surged like rockets with the added boost of these pills. None of them wanted to return to the slow, arduous pace of normal cultivation. They eagerly awaited the outbreak of a great harvest war and hoped it would come soon. The supreme leader of the demonic cultivators (Overlord) laughed heartily in a secret chamber. His laughter echoed across vast areas, heard by many demonic cultivators, even though it wasn't amplified with spiritual energy. He had just broken through to the middle stage of the void refinement realm. After receiving 10 batches of refined pills, he cultivated diligently, quickly achieving a breakthrough. What could be more exhilarating than that? Emerging from his chamber, he summoned his subordinates and asked, "What's the situation in the northern continent?" A subordinate named DM Thong replied, "Currently, we've only infiltrated a small portion of Tan Van Sek's outer sect. Progress has been slow. I am to blame." The leader waved his hand dismissively and said, "Slowly taking over is good, but don't go too slowly. I have high expectations for you. Don't disappoint me." Every year, a portal connecting the Western continent to the mortal realm would open. However, the number of mortals with spiritual roots was so low that the leader had grown frustrated. He had even abandoned the effort of harvest mortals, opting instead to focus on attacking the other continents. Back to the protagonist. The harvest season for the third quarter had finally arrived, and in the area, many rogue cultivators were eagerly reaping their crops. For this quarter, Yi Jun didn't plant spirit grain. Instead, she dedicated her fields to white and spirit vines. The lush, vibrant plants exuded a fragrant vitality that invigorated anyone nearby. 2 new spirit herbs were also planted nearby, though their cultivation period spanned 3 quarters. Yi Jun cast an earth control spell to carefully uproot the 2 new spirit herbs. She was eager to see what rewards the system would give for these new plants. Placing the herbs on a tray, she pressed the sell button. In an instant, the 2 spirit herbs vanished. The rewards included a talisman and a 100-gram piece of red ore. Weighing the ore in her hand, Yi Jun placed it into her storage bag, unsure of its value. Then, she picked up the talisman, her eyes widening as she examined it. It was a level 1 hide talisman. Yi Jun was not pleased. A low-level talisman like this was only worth 18 to 20 low-grade spirit stones at the market, far less than what she had spent on the seeds, not to mention the effort of nurturing the crops. Clicking her tongue in annoyance, she smacked her lips, got the talisman into her bag. She continued harvesting other spirit herbs, but kept 4 to sell to the herb market sect as usual. After gathering everything, she placed the remaining herbs on the tray and pressed the sell button again. This time, the system rewarded her with numerous glowing halo orbs of cultivation energy. The sparkling lights filled the tray. Yi Jun swiped her hand through the halo lights, absorbing them all in one go.
Ding.
1 year of cultivation energy absorbed.
Ding.
1 year of cultivation energy absorbed. She continued absorbing cultivation energy from the glowing orbs. It was the first time she had received so much at once. After some time spent absorbing and consolidating the spiritual energy within her dantian, Yi Jun finally stabilized her cultivation. She then carefully examined the remaining rewards. 1. 1 new jade slip. 2. 1 level 1 talisman. 3. 20 low-grade spirit stones 1 level. 4. 1 water control pearl. Yi Jun collected everything and stored it in her bag. She walking to her house, where her son was meditating with his eyes closed. Without disturbing him, she sat on her bed and began cultivating slowly. The large amount of cultivation energy she had absorbed earlier made her feel close to a breakthrough. Currently, Yi Jun was at level 6, a low-grade spiritual root cultivator with no attribute. For someone with such a spiritual root, reaching the 6th level of the Qi refinement realm by nearly 20 years old was impressive, on par with those who had higher-grade spiritual roots. As she cultivated, a smile appeared on her lips. It was a smile of gratitude for the system's assistance, which had allowed her to rise from the bottom. Salted fish flips over. From a lowly cultivator at the very bottom of society, she could manage to turn her life around. The weather began to bring cold winds, signaling a change of seasons. In the area belonging to the Tan Van sect, an outer sect deacon at the early stage of the Golden Core realm was attacked by another outer sect disciple. Fortunately, the deacon reacted quickly and countered. The battle between the two revealed the true identity of the disciple as a demonic cultivator. The Tan Van sect deacon's face twisted in shock upon seeing the disciple using demonic cultivation techniques. The deacon roared, "Who are you, and how dare you infiltrate our sect?" The demonic cultivator smirked but didn't answer, instead launching a series of aggressive techniques. Having been exposed, he had to fight quickly, but the disparity in their strength dragged the battle out, alarming other deacons in the Tan Van sect. The demonic cultivator, losing his composure, hastily threw down a smoke explosion orb and disappeared. Other disguised demonic cultivators witnessed the event, but remained motionless. The deacon shouted onto the smoke, "Capture that demonic cultivator." Thus, a group began chasing him, but the demonic cultivator had completely vanished, leaving no trace behind. The incident of a demonic cultivator infiltrating the Tan Van sect's disciples was reported, raising vigilance among the sect's leaders. They conducted continuous investigations, but found no further clues. A few weeks after the demonic cultivator's attack, the sect's annual spiritual root test proceeded as usual, filled with a lively atmosphere and excitement from many rogue cultivators coming to test their spiritual roots. Returning to the protagonist, Yi Jun planned to move to a new home the following year. However, worried that her secret might be discovered, she reconsidered and abandoned the idea of renting a new house. By the end of that year, she had successfully broken through to the 7th stage of the Qi refinement realm. Chapter 32. During the spiritual root testing festival, another attack by demonic cultivators was discovered, once again alarming many leaders of the Tan Van sect. The festival was cut short, resulting in fewer disciples being recruited than in previous years. The Tan Van sect intensified their investigations and screened disciples to track down the infiltrators, but as before, no traces were found. The second sudden attack by demonic cultivators left the senior leaders of the Tan Van sect deeply worried. They couldn't understand why there had been 2 consecutive attacks recently. Secretly, they tasked several other disciples to investigate various areas, but no clues surfaced. The demonic cultivator's ability to launch attacks within the Tan Van sect's area, which was protected by defensive arrays and clear restrictions that only disciples could enter, raised concerns. Everyone feared another unexpected attack. The incident was reported to higher authorities, and the senior leaders of the Tan Van sect issued orders to strengthen the defensive arrays and continue thorough surveillance and investigation. The 2 failed demonic cultivator attacks targeting some of the Tan Van sect's senior outer sect leaders reached the ears of the demonic cultivator DM Thong. He was displeased and ordered his subordinates to remain hidden and wait for the situation to cool down before striking again. Back in Yi Jun's room, on the evening of December 29th, at the end of winter, Yi Jun told Jun So, "I have something to do for a day. Stay home and cultivate as usual. Don't go outside, all right?" Jun So nodded obediently. Yi Jun entered her room and pulled out a 1-star card. She was curious about where it would take her. She decided to try it out, knowing that in the future, she might receive many similar time-traveling cards. She channeled her spiritual energy into the card to activate it. Immediately, starlight emanated from the card, and a spatial passage sucked Yi Jun in within a fraction of a second. Within moments, Yi Jun found herself in a clear sky, whole body is in the air. Since she had been teleported to a location without ground, she quickly began falling. She plunged into water, tasting the salty flavor. Yi Jun realized she had been transported to a sea. She swiftly used her spiritual energy to envelop her body and swam toward the shore. She felt fortunate that she hadn't fallen onto solid ground, which could have caused serious injury. From the water, she could only see high cliffs with waves crashing against them continuously. She couldn't find a beach to swim to. Yi Jun took out her spear from her storage bag and used a flight technique to hold on it. Grasping the spear tightly, she slowly flew into the sky. Reaching a certain altitude, she noticed a fence along the edge of the cliff and directed her spear to land there. Once her feet touched solid ground, Yi Jun stored her spear. The entire process had taken over an hour. Looking at the road, she noticed it was paved asphalt, something that only existed in her previous world. Yi Jun immediately understood that she had returned to a place resembling Earth. She wasn't sure if this was the Earth she had lived on before, but it seemed similar. She would need to explore further to confirm. Unsure of which direction to go, Yi Jun decided to run along the asphalt road. Occasionally, a car passed by. She waved at one, hoping to ask for directions, but the driver ignored her and drove on. Her goal wasn't to hitch a ride, but to gather information. Since the car didn't stop, she continued running. As a cultivator, she didn't feel tired and kept moving at a steady pace. In the sky, a remote-controlled drone capturing landscape footage accidentally recorded Yi Jun running on the road. The operator, focused on the scenery, didn't initially notice her. After some time, he looked at the screen and saw Yi Jun running without showing any signs of exhaustion. Intrigued by her unusual speed, he turned the camera to focus on her. Unaware of the drone, Yi Jun continued running, her speed gradually increasing to about 40 kilometers per hour. The drone's camera struggled to keep up with her pace despite flying in the air. The operator, realizing something weird, grew even more curious. When he tried to direct the drone back to find Yi Jun, she was already out of sight. Reviewing the footage, the operator calculated Yi Jun's running speed to exceed 30 kilometers per hour. Sweating, he muttered, "Is that speed even humanly possible?" He edited the footage and uploaded it to YouTube with the title, "Can humans really run at over 30 kilometers per hour?" The video quickly went viral, garnering numerous views and comments. Most viewers insisted that no human could run that fast, even with mechanical enhancements. Yi Jun was completely unaware and continued running swiftly. As she reached a stretch of road, she noticed a traffic sign and realized this was the road leading to her house. The sign read open parenthesis in this area is written in Korean because it is the proper name of a locality or city close parenthesis. Jo Sun Tuk Ku Ro Hang Dong Hang is the changed name. Jo Sun Tuk Ku Ro, Gyeonggi-do, Gwangyang City, Korea. Recognizing it, Yi Jun knew this was the same road she had once driven on to reach the Hangdong Hang Resort. Now that she knew the way home, she continued running. When she spotted cars in the distance, she tried waving them down for a ride, but no one stopped. She had no choice but to keep running. Once she entered a busier area with more cars and people, she slowed her pace, reducing her speed to just 14 kilometers per hour. She ran for several hours before finally reaching Changwon. Despite running for so long, she didn't feel tired at all. Gradually, she made her way to the house her parents had lived in during her previous life. In her mind, Yi Jun estimated it had been nearly 6 hours since she returned to this world. The card had given her only 24 hours, and with little time left, she decided to go to the house. Upon arrival, she stood outside and rang the doorbell. A few minutes later, someone stepped out. Yi Jun immediately recognized her. It was her mother. Her eyes welled up slightly. The elderly woman, her hair now streaked with gray, opened the door and asked who Yi Jun was looking for, or what to need it. Yi Jun looked at her mother, wanting to speak but unsure of what to say. She was afraid her mother wouldn't believe her or understand. Finally, she could only say, "Mom, I'm Yi Jun, your child." The elderly woman was taken aback when she heard that name. "Yi Jun? But he's my son. How could you possibly be him? She asked, confused. Yi Jun's eyes reddened, and her voice choked slightly. Mom, I'm Yi Jun. Let me tell you the secrets that only the two of us know. You'll recognize me for sure. Inside the house, Yi Jun's father was still sitting and watching TV. Both parents were retired, living a quiet and leisurely life, as they had no children anymore. They had only one child, but he had gone missing decades ago. The memories of him still lingered, and his belongings were left untouched, as though he had never left. Oblivious to what was happening, Yi Jun's father continued watching TV. Her mother, however, stared intently at Yi Jun, her face pensive. As Yi Jun recounted the secrets only they shared, details about the times her mother had disciplined her harshly, the old woman gradually began to realize that the woman before her was indeed Yi Jun. Her expression shifted to a mix of anger and shock before she finally exclaimed, "You really are my Yi Jun. After all these years of being missing, without sending us a single word, you finally show your face. Don't tell me you disappeared just to live your truth and become a woman? Did you have surgery to change your gender?" Yi Jun's eyes widened in disbelief upon hearing her mother's question. Chapter 33. Yi Jun, feeling awkward and unsure of how to respond, finally said, "Let's go inside and talk first, Mom." Despite her old age, the elderly woman still managed to voice her sharp questions. She then called loudly into the house, "Old man, Yi Jun is back." The TV inside was playing loudly, so it took her a few tries before her husband finally heard and came running out, shouting as he approached, "That troublemaker Yi Jun is back?" Hearing her mother's questioning tone, Yi Jun, though her eyes had been wet for a while, held back her tears. She could only hug the elderly woman tightly and say, "I missed you both so much. After all these years, I finally had the chance to return." Her mother asked, "What do you mean by that?" At the same time, her father came out and looked at the unfamiliar woman in front of him, asking, "Where's Yi Jun? I don't see him." The elderly woman pointed at Yi Jun and said, "That's him. He transitioned into a woman, which is why he didn't dare come home. It's been decades, and only now does he have the courage to show his face." After speaking, she sighed and led Yi Jun inside. The three of them sat down to talk. Yi Jun began, "I'm sorry, Mom and Dad." But as she spoke, emotions overwhelmed her, and she began to cry, tears streaming down her face. Her parents looked at her, deciding not to mention the topic of her transition anymore. Instead, they asked, "Where have you been all these years? Have you been okay? Did anyone bully you?" After crying for a while, Yi Jun finally calmed down and began to explain, "The truth is, decades ago, I didn't leave by choice." She paused and asked, "Can I borrow a map?" Yi Jun's father took out his phone and opened a map application. 3D map application projected light outside the phone. Yi Jun continued, "Actually, I died a long time ago." She typed an address into the map, showing the location of the accident near Hangdonghang. Her parents looked at her in disbelief but listened as she explained, "I had an accident in this area near Hangdonghang. If you send a search team there, they'll find my car and my remains. When you find my bones, please keep them safe. I'll need them someday." After this shocking revelation, Yi Jun began to recount her experience of reincarnation. She avoided mentioning the rape she endured and her child, instead explaining that she had been reborn into another world, like something out of a novel. As she spoke, she channeled her spiritual energy and began to levitate into the air. Her parents were utterly stunned by the sight. While floating, Yi Jun said, "I only have a little over 10 hours to talk with you. After this, I don't know when I'll have the chance to see you again. You're both almost 70 now, and I'm deeply worried." She then descended to the ground and demonstrated a wind manipulation technique, creating a small gust of wind that formed a barrier in front of her. Seeing her perform extraordinary magic for the second time, her parents began to recover from their initial shock. Her father asked, "So, you can only stay with us for about 10 more hours?" Yi Jun said, "That's right. My time travel card only lasts for 24 hours. I was teleported directly to the area where I once had my accident. At first, I didn't realize it, but when I saw the familiar old roads, it all came back to me. In my haste, I ran straight here, a very long distance." After speaking, Yi Jun demonstrated her water manipulation technique. She drew all the water from a glass, controlled it to swirl gracefully in midair for a few loops, and then returned it to the glass. By the third display of her mystical powers, Yi Jun's parents were no longer shocked or astonished. Instead, the three of them just wanted to embrace each other, comforting the longing that had built up over decades of separation. Yi Jun then said, "I live in a cultivation world where lifespans can stretch for a few hundreds of years, but human lives are so short. I'm afraid that by the time I have another chance to return, all of you'll no longer be here. That thought terrifies me." Yi Jun's mother responded, "That's just how life is. We have to accept it." She then added, "Go talk with your father while I prepare some food for you. You must miss the taste of home." Yi Jun quickly said, "Wait, Mom." From her storage pouch, she took out heaps of meat, placing some in the fridge and some in the cooler. She said, "Use this meat to cook. It's excellent for mortal bodies." Her mother took the meat and went to the kitchen. Meanwhile, Yi Jun sat and chatted with her father for about 30 minutes before her mother called them over. "Both of you, come to the table. Dinner is ready." Yi Jun picked up a piece of food and ate it with some rice. The feeling of being home was overwhelming, and tears began to flow as she ate. Yi Jun's father said, "Let her cry. Just let her cry it out." The two elderly parents, however, no longer had tears to shed. They quietly ate their meal. During dinner, Yi Jun said, "The meat I gave you is from spiritual beasts. It's filled with spiritual energy and can help extend mortal lifespans. Please eat it regularly, but don't share it with anyone." After the meal, the three of them sat together, holding hands and simply looking at one another. Once, they had so much to talk about, but now, in this rare moment of reunion, no words seemed enough. Time passed slowly, and silence filled the room. As they sat, Yi Jun quietly sensed the spiritual energy of Earth. She realized that Earth did indeed have spiritual energy, but it was incredibly sparse. She said, "Dad, can you get me a pen and some paper?" Her mother went into the house, opened a drawer, and brought out a pen and a stack of paper for Yi Jun. Yi Jun sat down and wrote the cultivation methods of a spiritual farmer and the art of wind manipulation. Yi Jun said, "I just checked, and Earth really does have spiritual energy. I don't know if you have spiritual roots, but I've written down these cultivation techniques from the cultivation world. I hope they can help extend your lifespans." She pushed the papers toward her father, who accepted them. Yi Jun then took all the spiritual stones from her storage pouch, placed them on the table, and said, "Since Earth's spiritual energy is so thin, use these stones to assist in absorption." Yi Jun continued, "I'd like to go to my old room and see where I used to live." The three of them walked into the room together, removing the cloths covering the furniture and looking at everything. Over 30 years had passed, and many items were damaged, but still there. Books Yi Jun used to read were deteriorating, and old childhood photos were fading. Yi Jun picked up a few photo frames to keep as mementos, along with her old toys. Her father recorded all of this on video, wanting to capture every moment. She said, "Let's go out and buy some toys." Without saying anything, her parents accompanied her to a toy store. Yi Jun bought models of buildings, cars, and trains. Her mother paid, and they returned home. Yi Jun then said, "In the cultivation world, I've actually started a family. I have a son who's almost 5 years old. He's incredibly smart, but unfortunately, he couldn't come here with me. She sighed with regret as she spoke. The three of them once again sat together, watching time pass. As the time approached for Yi Jun to leave, she broke into sobs and hugged her parents tightly, saying, "I have to go. Please take good care of yourselves. I promise that one day, I'll come back to visit you again." Yi Jun's mother said, "Take care of yourself over there." Her father recorded a video of the three of them together, transferred it to another phone, and handed it to Yi Jun. There was a knock on the door. Her father quickly went to get the package and handed it to Yi Jun. He said, "This is a manual generator to charge your phone. Take it with you." Yi Jun smiled, taking it and placing everything into her storage pouch. Only 1 minute remained before Yi Jun would be teleported away. She said, "I'll definitely come back." Seconds ticked by, and a teleportation portal appeared from nowhere. It began to pull Yi Jun in. She clung to her parents' hands, unwilling to let go, desperately trying to hold on. But the force was too strong. Yi Jun's hands slipped, and she was drawn into the void, disappearing completely. Her parents reached out to the void, but all they could touch was empty air. The two of them hugged each other tightly. Yi Jun's mother cried, while her father held her close, his eyes moist with unshed tears. Chapter 34. She was teleported back to her old position at the exact moment and location. Time seemed to have not changed at all. Yi Jun looked into the room and still saw little Junso there, preparing to begin cultivation as usual. Yi Jun thought everything was just an illusion of her own. She channeled spiritual power into her storage bag and pulled out the items she had kept, realizing that everything was real. The items from that other world were still in her hands, and the package her father bought had not been opened yet. Yi Jun took out her phone and looked at the video of all three of them. She hugged it close to her chest, tears falling from the corners of her eyes. She cried again. In the room, her child was still focused on cultivation, unaware that her father was holding something and crying. After a while, Yi Jun calmed down, and she went inside, placing the toys and picture frames on the table. She put the toys on the table near little Junso and placed the picture frames on the shelf. 3 days later, spring had fully arrived in the northern region, marking the start of the spring planting season. Yi Jun continued to use her techniques to cultivate in her garden. After planting everything and watering the crops, it was almost noon before everything was done. Yi Jun entered the house. Little Junso was very fond of the new toys Yi Jun had brought back. It had really started to understand the architecture that Yi Jun's father had described. It also saw the images of its grandparents on a strange device called a phone. It also saw images of Yi Jun's father as a child and as an adult in the picture frames. It compared and realized that Yi Jun's father now did not look the same as in the photos. It was curious but did not ask, just wondering about it. The farming days of Yi Jun's family passed by peacefully, slowly, in happy moments. During her meeting with her family in Korea, she had given her parents many spirit stones. Currently, in her storage bag, there were only a few hundred broken spirit stones, just enough money to buy some spirit grain for the family to get through the next 3 months. When the harvest season arrived, Yi Jun would be able to earn some money from selling spirit herbs, and everything would return to its original trajectory. Months later, the first quarter planting had gone well. This time, Yi Jun kept 4 spirit herbs, and the rest would be sold to the system. The 2 fields had produced 80 spirit herbs, with 4 kept. The remaining 76 were sold. Yi Jun called the system out loud. The system appeared, and Yi Jun quickly gathered all the fully grown spirit herbs into the system's tray. The sell button lit up. Yi Jun pressed the button, and instantly, all the spirit herbs disappeared. A few seconds later, items were returned. This time, the system rewarded her with the following items. 5 fragments spirit stones. For level 1 earth talisman. 1 level 1 invisibility, hide, talisman. 2 level 2 plant talismans. 3 level 1 move underground talismans. 2 water control pearls, 1 smoke explosion pearl, 1 cultivation aura halo light, 1 level 1 bamboo leaf, 1 square-shaped stone. Seeing the many items returned, Yi Jun collected them all. This time, Yi Jun only received 5 fragment spirit stones, a very small amount compared to previous sales. The cultivation aura halo light gave Yi Jun 7th months of cultivation. She also noticed 2 new items from the system, the bamboo leaf and the square-shaped stone. She checked carefully. The bamboo leaf was a mortal tool that allowed cultivators to fly in the air, and the square-shaped stone was a material for setting up formations. She didn't understand formations well, so she just put them in her storage bag and ignored them. She used the flight technique on the bamboo leaf, and it grew larger. Yi Jun jumped on it and flew around a few times. She noticed that the bamboo leaf consumed spiritual energy, just like a sword or spear. The only difference was that the bamboo leaf allowed for slightly faster flight, just a little faster. When the harvest was over, there was only a short break before the next planting season began. Because she didn't receive many spirit stones from the system this time, selling the 4 spirit herbs to the herbal shop didn't yield much money. Yi Jun had to sell some unnecessary items from her storage bag to make enough money to buy seeds and food for the next 3 months of the second quarter. Her bag currently had many talismans. She picked out a few earth talismans, water talismans, and a water control pearl. She went to a convenience sect market to meet the shopkeeper. She took out 2 earth talismans and 2 level 1 water talismans. Since these were low-level talismans, the buyback price wasn't high. She sold each one for 6 lower-grade spirit stones, and the water control pearl was appraised as a low-level item, with a buyback price of 21 lower-grade spirit stones. Yi Jun calculated that this wasn't enough to buy white Sephora japonica and spirit vines, so she decided to take out the immortal flute to check its price. If the store offered a high buyback price, she would sell it. She didn't understand music theory and wouldn't benefit from keeping it. The shopkeeper took the flute, examined it carefully, and offered a buyback price of 75 lower-grade spirit stones. Yi Jun noticed the price was quite low compared to the weapons sold in the blacksmith shop. Yi Jun said, "It's an immortal flute. Why is the buyback price so low?" The shopkeeper replied, "The flute is very finely crafted, but the problem is that there are very few cultivators in this area who use music theory. I'm offering this price as a friendly gesture. Who knows when someone will want to buy it?" Yi Jun seemed a bit hesitant, as if she didn't want to sell, but then she changed her mind and decided to sell it to the grocery sect market anyway, since they had been buying from her for a long time. So Yi Jun accepted 75 lower-grade spirit stones and left. The flute was sealed in a box and priced at 1.2 middle-grade spirit stones. If Yi Jun had known the selling price at the store was so high, many times higher than the purchase price, she would have regretted it and felt upset. The store manager said to the nearby salesperson, "We've known her for many years, and now we realize she's a fat goat." He was pleased with the large profit he had made. After Yi Jun got some money, she didn't buy seeds from the grocery store, but went straight to the herbs market. She bought 10 white Sephora japonica seeds and a bag of spirit grain seeds. With the remaining money, she went to the loose cultivator market to buy some meat and other necessary supplies. Yi Jun happily returned home, pulling out the spirit grain box and placing them by the kitchen corner. She also took out a piece of meat and started boiling it. The broth would be used to cook porridge. 40 minutes later, the meal was ready. Yi Jun cut the meat into bite-sized pieces and mixed them with some seasoning. She covered it up and went upstairs to her room. She saw her child still studying. She said, "I've finished cooking. When you're hungry, come downstairs to get some food." Jun-so replied, "Yes." Chapter 35. In another area within the Tan-Van sect, the main area for inner disciples, deacons, and elders, after discovering the 2 attacks from the demonic cultivators, they were lucky to have detected them in time, preventing any losses. 6 months passed without any further disturbances, causing everyone to feel more at ease and let their guard down. They thought that after months of searching, the demonic cultivators had been scared away, no longer daring to appear. With this, their vigilance began to slip as they relaxed. Life for everyone returned to normal. What they didn't know was that the demonic disciples were silently observing, waiting for another opportunity to strike. Inside the cave residence of an elder named Thoidain, a late-stage golden core cultivator, after a period of intense cultivation, he gave himself some time for relaxation. His hobby was cultivating various colorful spiritual herbs, which could be used for pill refinement as well as creating a beautiful landscape around his residence. As a high-level cultivator, daily cultivation could be boring, so many cultivators choose hobbies such as growing spiritual herbs, refining immortal tools, or alchemy. For most cultivators, these tasks are means to earn an income, but for someone like Thoidain, they were merely a form of enjoyment. At his level, with access to abundant resources and privileges from the sect, there were no other burdens, so his life was calm, leisurely, and comfortable. While he was focused on tending to the spiritual herbs in the garden near his sprital cave, a disciple approached and said, "Disciple respectfully greets Elder. I have a matter I wish to seek guidance on, and I ask for your help." Elder Thoidain didn't turn around and continued tending to the plants, speaking leisurely. "Speak, what is it?" The disciple opened parenthesis, a demonic cultivator in disguise close parenthesis said, "Esteemed Elder, I have something I wish you to examine." Then, the disciple stepped closer to Elder Thoidain. Elder Thoidain didn't turn around, continuing his care of the plants. The demonic cultivator disguised as a disciple approached and held out a box to Elder Thoidain. As the disciple got within 40 centimeters, the object suddenly exploded, releasing a dark mist with red undertones. Caught by surprise, Elder Thoidain was unprepared. His body went limp, and his mouth froze, unable to speak. His eyes looked at the disciple as if questioning, "What does this mean?" A few seconds later, his eyes darkened, and he lost consciousness. The demonic disciple successfully captured Elder Thoidain, allowing a demonic cultivator of equivalent rank to smoothly replace him in the position. The memories and habits of Elder Thoidain were extracted and perfectly simulated, to the point where even those familiar with him couldn't notice any difference. At the same time, many outer and inner disciples of the Tan Van sect were successfully captured by the demonic cultivators, without making the slightest sound. In another area, at the grocery sect market, the shopkeeper was introducing an exquisite item called the flute to an outer disciple of Tan Van sect. After some haggling, the outer disciple managed to buy it for 1 middle-grade spirit stone and 50 lower-grade spirit stones, an excellent deal for a disciple of Tan Van sect. The disciple left joyfully. In the Tan Van sect's library, there were several teachings on sound and music law, and when the disciple saw this flute, he realized it was perfect for his cultivation, so he purchased it. The Tan Van sect's library held a few texts specialized in sound and music law, but there were very few dedicated immortal weapons, and almost no one refined them. As a result, weapons related to sound and music law were extremely rare items. Even low-level weapons would attract many cultivators. Thus, after a few days of display, the item was quickly sold in the grocery store, fast and smooth. In another world, South Korea, after Yi Jun left, his parents remained in the spot where Yi Jun had vanished. They stared at the empty space for hours, not wanting to leave until the sky turned dark, and by midnight, their hunger became overwhelming. Only then did they leave, returning to their daily lives. Yi Jun's mother took some of the monster meat that Yi Jun had left in the fridge. She stir-fried it with some napa cabbage and placed the dish on the table. The two sat down to enjoy the meal happily. The next day, they woke up feeling much healthier than usual. When they looked in the mirror, they noticed that the wrinkles on their skin had faded a little. They realized that the meat Yi Jun had left behind really did have a rejuvenating effect, making them feel younger. So, They decided to eat the monster meat every day, along with practicing the cultivation method Yi Jun had left behind. Additionally, they placed many spirit stones throughout the house, in every corner, with each spot having a piece of spirit stone. The spirit stones emitted a gentle aura of spiritual energy, purifying the air and making it sweeter than usual. Breathing in these air currents unknowingly nourished their bodies, doubling their recovery. Their health quickly improved, and they even started to heal naturally. The neighbors around them also felt the spiritual energy, experiencing a vibrant and unusual vitality, making everyone in the area feel cheerful and approachable. A few days later, they contacted a search team to look for Yi Jun in the designated area. After several more days, the car was found. Yi Jun's skeleton was neatly arranged inside a large glass jar, filled with alcohol. The jar was placed in the main room, in a prominent position where anyone entering the house could see it. Since Yi Jun's parents were elderly and retired, they rarely had visitors, so no one knew about the skeleton in the main room. If anyone did know, they might think that the elderly couple was eccentric for doing so. But for Yi Jun's parents, they wanted to preserve the skeleton and look at it every day, waiting for Yi Jun to return from the other world so they could give it back to him, as he had wished. Yi Jun's parents continued their daily lives, diligently practicing the cultivation method. After several months of effort, both Yi Jun's father and mother still couldn't enter the path of cultivation. They couldn't absorb spiritual energy into their bodies, even though they had eaten the monster meat and absorbed the spiritual stones naturally. Both of them thought that perhaps their age made it harder for them to learn, but they didn't give up because of the difficulty. They remained determined to learn how to absorb spiritual energy. They didn't know when Yi Jun would return, and as they aged, they feared that by the time Yi Jun came back, they might have already passed away, unable to see him again. Although Yi Jun's skeleton was in front of them, it could only somewhat ease their longing. They wanted to meet the real Yi Jun, a son who could speak to them, not a relic like the skeleton before them. Time quietly passed, and 10 more years went by. Both of them were now nearing 80 years old. By this age, most of their relatives had passed away, but the two of them still looked the same, with no significant changes in appearance. Their health remained good, and they even seemed slightly younger. Another 10 years slipped by. Day after day, they worked hard on cultivation, but still failed. At times, they became despairing. They collected many novels about the world of cultivation, carefully studying them. They learned that to cultivate like Yi Jun, they needed something called a spiritual root. Yet they didn't know if they themselves possessed spiritual roots. They were somewhat anxious, and another 10 years passed. Their health remained the same, and their neighbors were just as healthy as they were, showing no signs of aging either. 20 years had passed since Yi Jun's departure, and despite their efforts, they still couldn't enter the path of cultivation. After such a long struggle, they finally gave up and accepted it. Their peers and relatives had almost all passed away, leaving behind children and grandchildren. However, those grandchildren rarely visited the two of them. Over the years, it was just the two elderly parents together. Even without visits from their extended family, they still happily enjoyed their old age. Another 10 years went by, and now their lifespan had nearly reached 100 years. The neighbors were not much different in age from them. Yi Jun's parents still looked the same, with seemingly little change. Although the neighbors' lifespans had extended thanks to the spiritual energy radiating from Yi Jun's parents' house, their faces were now deeply wrinkled, and their health had significantly declined. Yi Jun's parents had waited for 30 long years. 30 years had passed like an eternity, yet their memories of meeting Yi Jun remained as vivid as if it were just yesterday. When they had been together, there were so many things they had wanted to say, but they hadn't managed to say much at all. Chapter 36. Yi Jun's parents were very old, nearly 100 years old. In South Korea, the average life expectancy was 82, so they had outlived most people. At that age, they were deeply worried, uncertain when they might unexpectedly leave this world. Despite their anxiety, there was nothing they could do about it. The limits of human existence could not be defied. Another 10 years passed. After years of waiting and worrying, they had come to accept the inevitability of their departure one day in the future. During these 10 years, the neighbors living nearby had also passed away, each having lived to over 100 years old. In slightly more distant areas, people were living into their 90s. The grandchildren of their relatives were now over 50 years old. As they aged, they began visiting their relatives more often, including Yi Jun's parents. Yi Jun's parents were enthusiastic and delighted to welcome these relatives into their home, bringing joy to their lives. When the grandchildren entered the house, they noticed a jar containing a skeleton. They were startled by what seemed to be the peculiar hobby of these two relatives. Upon asking, they learned that it was Yi Jun's skeleton, their uncle's or granduncle's remains. They couldn't say much. Despite being over 50, these grandchildren were healthy and likely to live another 30 years or more. They thought that Yi Jun's parents were old and childless. After their passing, the parents' assets would likely be divided among them, so they visited more frequently to strengthen their bond. Yi Jun's parents, now over 100 years old, thought they might leave this world in a few years. They understood that their property would eventually go to these relatives, so the frequent visits were natural. The Yi Jun's parents welcomed these grandchildren warmly. They had already written a will, planning to divide their assets equally among the grandchildren, but they hadn't told them about it yet. When they eventually passed away, the family court would handle the process to distribute the inheritance. The visits from these relatives brought a cheerful atmosphere to their lives. Many times, overwhelmed by their longing for Yi Jun, they would play videos of Yi Jun. Although these videos were short, they helped ease their nostalgia. Over the past 30 years, Earth's technology had become very advanced. Images stored in memory devices could now be projected onto large screens in vivid 3D, far more lifelike than viewing them on a phone or television screen. Returning to the world of the protagonist, Yi Jun, after purchasing the seeds, Yi Jun resumed her daily work, carefully tending to her crops and nurturing them with spiritual energy to ensure they thrived. She took meticulous care, waiting for the exciting rewards from the system after selling her harvest. She longed to receive the time travel card once more. Time passed peacefully and happily. As the second quarter of the year drew to a close, families eagerly anticipated a bountiful harvest. Yi Jun quickly harvested her spiritual grain, threshing the golden grains and placing them into fabric sacks. She estimated that her plot of spiritual land had yielded about 32 kilograms of grain this time. She summoned the system and sold all 32 kilograms. The grain disappeared, and immediately afterward, the system's reward appeared. Yi Jun carefully examined the small tray from the system. She didn't see any cultivation or a halo light this time, but instead, a pile of spirit stones and fragmented spirit pieces. When she retrieved them, she found that she had received a total of 400 fragmented spirit pieces and 40 lower-grade spirit stones. She calculated that selling to the system always brought in significantly higher profits than selling outside. Smiled gently. She continued using her soil control technique to uproot the white Sephora japonica trees, placing them into the tray. This time, she sold everything without keeping anything back. Items poured out rapidly. Yi Jun received the following rewards. 1. A square wooden block, 12 centimeters x 4 centimeters. 2. 10 level 1 talisman papers. 3. 1 bottle of diluted water. 4. 1 cultivation halo light aura, 2 days of cultivation. Thus, the second quarter's harvest ended successfully. Yi Jun had a short break of a few days, a period used for tilling the soil and fertilizing it to enrich it for the next planting. This task was leisurely. With this harvest, Yi Jun gained some spirit stones, enabling her to purchase more expensive seeds, such as the white Sephora and spiritual vine. However, she didn't dare buy pricier ones, fearing she wouldn't have enough funds. Since she still had half a bag of spirit grain seeds left, she only needed to purchase a few additional seeds for the third quarter's planting. Yi Jun went inside and asked, "Jun-so, would you like to go out with me to buy some seeds?" Jun-so, having visited the grocery sect market and other areas numerous times, no longer found it interesting. He replied, "No, I don't want to go. Those places are boring. I'd rather stay home and cultivate." Being young and at a low cultivation level, his current enthusiasm was solely focused on leveling up. Since Jun-so didn't want to accompany her, Yi Jun had no choice but to go alone, as she usually did. She headed straight to the herbal sect market to buy seeds. Despite having learned a flying technique, Yi Jun preferred walking. The distance from her home to the marketplace wasn't far, so she saw no need to show off. It's worth noting that most rogue cultivators working in agriculture were poor, with low cultivation levels. Few could afford to buy or learn expensive immortal techniques. If someone or a family displayed wealth or extravagance, it could arouse envy or unwelcome attention, akin to wearing flashy jewelry in a poor neighborhood, becoming overly conspicuous and inviting the gaze of undesirable elements. After purchasing the seeds, she wandered around other market areas, checking for new or intriguing items to buy. At the same time, a refined young man with a well-proportioned build and charismatic demeanor was strolling leisurely nearby. Normally, he rarely going to the outskirts, but today he acted on a whim. His name was Deep Van Hao, the eldest grandson of an elder ranked third in the inner sect of Tan Van. The sect had 18 elders, and a third-ranked elder held considerable authority, outranking those in fourth place and below. His grandfather was immensely influential within the sect, possessing a nascent soul early-stage cultivation at level 42. Van Hao himself had medium-grade spiritual roots with water and wood affinities, making him a recognized talent in the Deep family clan. He had reached the pinnacle of the foundation establishment stage at level 20. That day, acting on a whim, he strolled through the area, holding a folding fan and exuding a scholarly elegance. His demeanor resembled that of a literary academic. A literary scholar exudes an aura of elegance and intellect. He possesses a slender, graceful frame that speaks of a life devoted to study rather than physical toil. His complexion is fair and clear, accentuated by a serene and thoughtful expression that reflects his deep understanding of the world. His features are delicate yet defined, arched brows like ink strokes, a high nose bridge, and calm, observant eyes that seem to hold countless stories. As he wandered, he observed the lives of rogue cultivators, leisurely taking in the sights. While strolling, he noticed Yi Jun haggling with a vendor over the price of goods. At first, he paid her no mind, but as he approached, he sensed something extraordinary about Yi Jun. On closer inspection, he noticed her pleasing figure and her sharp, V-line face. Just one glance stirred his heart. That single encounter was enough to awaken emotions within him. Being from a powerful family, Van Hao had already married several beautiful wives, but his desire for novelty flared once more, even though he was not lacking in beautiful partners. When Yi Jun's deal was successful, he quietly followed behind. His elegance also disappeared and turned into a hurried appearance to follow Yi Jun. Chapter 37. He kept a distance from Yi Jun, observing her from afar. Yi Jun remained completely unaware and continued her leisurely stroll. When she arrived at a more deserted area, a voice called out loudly behind her, "Fellow Taoist, please stop." Yi Jun turned her head, surprised to hear a stranger calling out to her. She didn't respond immediately, but looked at the unfamiliar figure with curiosity, waiting to see what he wanted. The man introduced himself. "Fellow Taoist, I am Van Hao, a member of the Tan Van sect. Upon seeing you for the first time, I felt a strong desire to become friend. Might I ask if you already have a husband companion?" Yi Jun's thoughts raced with an odd mix of confusion and unease.
What?
seeking friendship but asking about husband? Realizing something wasn't right, she quickly activated her spiritual energy and fled without hesitation. Just from his question, she could sense an ill intent from him. Van Hao, caught off guard by her abrupt departure, immediately gave chase. Lick lips in amusement, he thought. Well, this lady is quite intriguing. With that, he continued his pursuit, treating the chase as a game of cat and mouse. Yi Jun's face darkened as she ran. She had a sinking feeling that she had fallen into trouble this time. Anxiously, she pushed herself to accelerate. Upon leaving the vicinity of the Tan Van sect, she swiftly took out a bamboo leaf artifact. Tossing it into the air, it became large and she leapt onto it, flying away at high speed. From a distance, Van Hao watched her escape with a faint smile. He then summoned a flying sword and continued his pursuit. He thought to himself, for a rogue cultivator with little backing, having such an artifact is unusual. Still, it's hardly worth anything compared to what he had. Noticing that Van Hao was quickly closing the gap, Yi Jun turned her head to confront him while discreetly retrieving several low-grade talismans from her sleeve. Open parenthesis in the past, people often had the habit of sewing a small pocket inside the sleeve open parenthesis of clothes with large sleeves close parenthesis to conveniently take things easily close parenthesis. Yi Jun said coldly, "We don't know each other. Why are you making things difficult for me?" Van Hao replied with a smirk. "What's difficult about this? Strangers can become acquaintances. I've fallen for you at first sight. If you don't have a Dao companion, husband, why not consider becoming one of my concubines?" Hearing his shameless words, Yi Jun's expression grew even darker. She responded sharply, "Can't you see that I'm a man just like you? A man cannot become your concubine." Van Hao sneered. "Oh, you claim to be a man? I don't believe it. With a chest like that, how could you possibly be a man?" His tongue slid across his lips, revealing an insatiable, lecherous greed. Yi Jun felt a chill envelop her body, a coldness that pierced to her core. For a fleeting moment, she thought, once upon a time, I was a true man. But even then, I was never as lecherous greed as this. Van Hao continued, his tone unrepentant. "Whether you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter to me. I'm willing to accept you either way. What's the difference?" Yi Jun's face darkened, her expression growing more and more severe. Without hesitation, she hurled nearly 10 low-grade offensive talismans toward Van Hao open parenthesis Yun Hao close parenthesis. The first-tier talismans were weak, each capable of unleashing only a small attack. Van Hao saw the flurry of feeble strikes and smirked, effortlessly dodging them without even needing to defend. Yi Jun's face turned pale as she saw Van Hao's calm, unbothered demeanor. Gritting her teeth, she threw another 10 offensive talismans at him. Simultaneously, she activated a concealment talisman and a teleportation talisman, vanishing in an instant. The teleportation talisman, being only first tier, was limited in range and teleported her only about a kilometer away. Though she was now hidden, she remained fearful. She quickly fled further, flying through the sky. Once she found a secluded area, she took multiple turns and twists, trying to throw off any potential pursuit. She didn't stop until the concealment talisman's effect wore off. Finally, she returned home, her face pale and her heart still pounding in fear. She poured herself a glass of water and drank it in one gulp. Inside the small room, little Junso was still meditating, oblivious to everything that had transpired. Yi Jun's thoughts were a whirlwind of worry. Will he track me down? In the world of cultivation, there are countless bizarre methods someone like him could use. This was the third time she had felt such intense fear. After taking several deep breaths to calm herself, Yi Jun steadied her mind and headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. However, upon entering, she saw that the meal had already been prepared and only needed to be served. Even though she had calmed herself, the lingering unease made it impossible to enjoy the meal fully. After eating in silence, she returned to her room, sitting cross-legged to meditate and absorb spiritual energy. She tried to focus and act as though nothing had happened, but the memory of the encounter refused to fade. Early the next morning, everything was still peaceful. Yi Jun's mind was completely stable. She returned to her daily work. Sowing seeds. After Van Hao saw Yi Jun throw out dozens of low-level attack talismans, he leisurely dodged them back and forth, then saw Yi Jun throw them out again. He still didn't even bother to put these talismans in his eyes. On the second attack, Yi Jun disappeared before his eyes very unexpectedly. Even though Yi Jun had vanished without a trace, Van Hao shouted after her, "You can run, but you cannot escape from me." His booming laughter echoed across the area before he left. 2 days later, Van Hao received news about Yi Jun's location. Smirking, he chuckled, "You're quite the intriguing one. I like you even more now." Without delay, he and a few subordinates set off toward Yi Jun's residence. Day 2. Yi Jun, not seeing any sign of the strange man found her, began to hope that she had successfully escaped. Breathing a sigh of relief, she muttered to herself, "Next time I go out, I'll wear a veil. I can't let something like this happen again." She silently thanked her foresight for not selling those talismans, despite holding on to them for so long. Finally, they proved useful. Day 3. As usual, Yi Jun was tending to her spiritual field until nearly noon. She was about to prepare lunch when a loud voice from outside shattered her peace. Her face darkened immediately upon hearing it. The voice was unmistakable. It was him. The pervert had found her. Yi Jun rushed inside her house, quickly gathering her belongings. With trembling hands, she pulled out a hide talisman and an earth escape talisman, shoving them into Jun So's tiny hands. He worked swiftly, but there was no time to take everything. Grabbing only the essentials, she left the rest behind. Clutching Jun So's hand tightly, the two activated the talismans together. Both of them disappeared into the ground, running far away from the area. Outside, Van Hao arrived with his subordinates. He announced loudly, "My beauty, I've come for you. Don't bother running. You won't escape my grasp." The residents in the surrounding area could hear the voice with the oppressive pressure from Van Hao's high cultivation level. Fearful, none dared to peek outside their homes. Instead, they huddled inside, praying that the chaos wouldn't touch them. Van Hao waited, but there was no response. Growing impatient, he ordered his subordinates to break through the low-tier illusion array still protecting Yi Jun's rented courtyard. Within minutes, the array was shattered. Van Hao and his men stormed inside, only to find an empty house. The lingering warmth in the items left behind told him that Yi Jun had fled just moments ago. Subordinates immediately used a tracking technique to pinpoint her escape route. Determining her location, Van Hao and his group set off in pursuit. Van Hao sneered as he moved. "Her pitiful tricks are nothing to me. A low-level rogue cultivator like her, poor and powerless, can't run for long. She'll fall into my hands soon enough." In his heart, he was determined. He wanted to personally capture Yi Jun. Chapter 38. Both the Hide Talisman and the Earth Escape Talisman had a time limit. When they realized that the time was almost up, they both surfaced, continuing to step on the bamboo leaf and running away. After running for a while, Yi Jun felt that someone was chasing her. Yi Jun turned her head to look back and recognized the lecherous, perverted Van Hao. Her face darkened even more. She continuously transmitted her spiritual power, concentrating and flying away. Even though she tried to fly away because her level was still weak, she was quickly caught up to. She was scared and continuously threw attack talismans, then threw explosive pearls, all of which seemed to be useless against them. With no other way, she stopped in the air, holding the immortal spear in her hand, preparing to fight. She knew that she didn't have enough spiritual power to run away anymore. She had to fight. She was worried about whether she could win this battle or not. Yi Jun said, Jun So, you should fly by yourself, I'll go fight them. Jun So was confused and didn't know what was going on. He was sitting and cultivating. Suddenly Yi Jun's put a talisman in his hand and ran. Then they ran away together. When they got here, Yi Jun's didn't run anymore and turned back to fight. This was the first time he saw his dad Yi Jun fighting, even though he had seen his dad Yi Jun practice spear dancing many times. He controlled the immortal sword to fly a little further away. Even from afar, he could still see some people approaching and surrounding them. Yi Jun didn't say anything but flew straight to attack Van Hao, holding the spear in her hand and stabbing in front of Van Hao. With his high level of cultivation, Van Hao did not care about her. He gently used his fan to repel Yi Jun's spear thrusts with an extremely happy expression. While dodging and parrying Yi Jun's attacks, he still smiled and said, "What a strong woman." In the world of immortal cultivation, everyone cultivates, including women. But very few women use spears as weapons. Most female cultivators often use swords, zither, whips, cloth as weapons. The fact that Yi Jun used a spear as a weapon made him love Yi Jun even more. Book number 3 ends here. Continue reading in book number 4. Love this audiobook from author Dai Pham. Please donate for author.